Balancing independence and vulnerability of older adults. That's the subject of today's ACTEC Trust and Estate Talk.
Welcome to ACTEC Trust and Estate Talk from the American College of Trust and Estate Counsel, a professional society of peer-elected trust and estate lawyers. This series offers professionals best practice advice, insights, and commentary on subjects that affect our profession and clients. To keep up with the changing world of wealth planning, subscribe at iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or other podcast sites. And now, our ACTEC Fellow host with today's topic.
This is Doug Stanley, ACTEC Fellow from St. Louis. Professor Mary Radford, ACTEC Fellow from Atlanta, Georgia, will be discussing these issues for older adults. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Doug. The subtitle of my talk is What If Granny Wants to Gamble? And my talk is about balancing the issues that we're going to face as attorneys when we have clients who do want to engage in behaviors that we might not think advisable. So in my talk, I start with just an overview of what Americans look like today. And we're graying, there's no question about that. The 85 plus in terms of age is the fastest growing demographic in our society. And then I focus on the fact that this has become more of a women's issue than an overall societal issue, primarily because women are living longer. So even though the general proportion between men and women in our society is about 50-50, by the time people reach age 85, there are about twice as many women still alive as there are men. And many of these women are alone. They don't have families, they don't have support groups. So another statistic that I point out is that by age 75, almost half women are living alone. So this makes them vulnerable to elder abuse, obviously, and particularly for purposes of my talk to elder financial abuse, or what some people call elder financial exploitation. And this can range from anything between the stranger who sends the email to try to get your private information to your personal caregiver to members of the family. And I talk a bit in this talk about the various ways in which this elder abuse is perpetrated. And society's waking up to this problem, which is good, and we're passing laws. And the most prevalent of those laws are what are called the reporting laws. So every state has a law that requires certain people to report suspected elder abuse. But the danger, in my mind, of our societal reaction is that we're going to go overboard and we're going to overprotect, and that these laws are going to be overly inclusive so that they're basically going to stereotype all older people, older women, as being frail and feeble and susceptible. And they're going to forget that there are lots of women still out there who are capable of making their own decisions and who still have capacity. They may have eccentricities, and they might want to engage in behavior that we would not consider advisable, or we might even think it's downright stupid. But the point of my talk is that if this granny wants to leave her estate to the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Cockroaches, and she has capacity, then she should have the freedom to do so, that we shouldn't stand in her way. So this is the balancing act. It's protecting those who are truly vulnerable. And of course, dementia is causing a lot of vulnerability in this day and age, while on the other hand, protecting the autonomy of those who still do have the capacity to make choices, again, regardless of what we think of their choices. So we have to stifle our urge to overprotect everybody in the notion that, again, we have to separate out the women in our society, the people in our society who still do have capacity. And maybe the simplest way for us to do this is to look at the actions and judge them by the actions themselves, as opposed to judging them by the age of someone who is performing the action. So in other words, if Granny's over age 65 and she likes to gamble, would we treat her differently than if she were a 25-year-old man who also liked to gamble? And again, my hope is that this talk will cause people to think of this problem in an arena other than simply chronological age. So I'm looking forward to giving the talk, and I hope people will listen to it and maybe even get something out of it. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for previewing your Tractman lecture for our audience.
This concludes Professor Radford's introduction to her Tractman lecture on balancing independence and vulnerability of older adults. Next Tuesday, we will present the first in this three-part special ACTEC Trust and Estate Talk series.
Thank you for listening to this episode of ACTEC Trust and Estate Talk, the podcast about wealth planning matters from the American College of Trust and Estate Counsel. To find an ACTEC lawyer near you, visit actec.org. Please subscribe to this podcast and leave us a rating or a review at iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you download your podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at ACTEC Talk.